thank you so much for spending the time with us and fitting us into your department meetings or just, having the time today as we talk about this transition to Canvas. Throughout this session today, we're going to be referencing the Canvas transition website. There's also a QR code here. What that does is that takes you to a website that we created for your convenience. It's a one-stop shop for everything that is related to the Canvas transition. We didn't want to add the extra stress of faculty having to go out on the ISU website and search for things or try to look for a how-to guide on a particular thing that you had to search on your own. You have enough on your plates, and we wanted to make this convenient and easy for you. At the bottom of this website, in the far right-hand corner, there is a copy of the slides. The slides have links in them, and so that is a hard copy of the slides for you if you want to be able to access certain things, but also remember that things are on that Canvas transition website as well. So first off, I want to talk about what makes it so exciting to be going to Canvas. You might be like, Mark, you're nuts. But as far as like the Canvas learning management system, what's good about it, what I like about it is that it's just a simplistic design. We've all worked in Moodle for a long time, and we know that Moodle's a workhorse. Moodle sometimes could be a little grumpy. Moodle could sometimes put my image on the right side of the screen when I want it to be on the left side of the screen. When you think of Canvas, it really has a simplistic design. And that leads me into the next one with page functionality. It's like a big digital book. And that digital book has a cover, which is your course homepage. It has a table of contents, which is like the listing of all the modules or weeks, depending on how you organize it. And then it's just a bunch of pages. Whereas Moodle was different. It was based on a calendar. It also has, while you're in there doing your page functionality, you can do some drag and drop editing. So if you have a quiz that came over from Moodle and it's at the bottom of your week and you want to move it up further on in that week, you could just click and drag and it goes right up there. So that's a nice feature of it. It has some really enhanced quizzing features, and we could really get into depth on that. And there might be a future webinar as far as the quizzing, but there's a lot of different options for quizzing in Canvas. Your quizzes will come over just fine in the import. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to really demonstrate what a backup of your Moodle course, a download, and an import into Canvas looks like. The last thing here on this page is it's student friendly. And going back to that page functionality, your students are going to know where they are in their course, and they're not going to have a problem with getting lost. It's, like I said, it's like a book. So they'll be able to page from one page of your, to the next, to the next, to the next. They can go back. It's really student friendly. And that's one of the many things that I like about it from the student perspective. And then automated grading policies is really nice. Canvas has a nice grade book. You can set grading policies in Canvas so that when your students don't turn something in on time, it automatically changes that. It marks it in as a 0 so that it's a true reflection of their grade. So let's say they missed the deadline. You can set it up so that it automatically zeroes that out. You can also go in so that if they turn it in late and you allow that it can readjust back to what their true grade is. But it's a nice automated process. And the speed grader, which is what they call their grade book, is also nice. It's streamlined. It allows you to do some basic things. Moodle had a little bit more customization for those folks that were like really into weights and means and things like that. And Canvas has that to an extent, but it's a little bit more basic. You can also do some quick updating of your assignments in one place, which is nice. And that'll save you some time when you move all your content over, that you'll be able to go and update your dates really quickly. We're all concerned about accessibility and making sure that our materials are available to everyone. And Canvas has a line checker, and it's within the rich content editor. And I can explain what that is a little bit later. But anywhere there's an edit box, basically, you can check the accessibility of your text. And this last thing is really cool, because how many times have you checked and double checked and triple checked your hyperlinks only to arrive in class and find out, like last night, that somebody changed the location of an article and then you have a broken link? With Canvas, you can do a scan It's called a links validator, and you can do a scan of your course, and it'll tell you which links are broken, if there are any, and it'll take you right to that. Now you have to manually correct it with the new link. It's a nice thing to just scan real quickly before the first day of class or whatever. It'll tell you if you have any broken links. And that way it'll spare you like any kind of embarrassment, because you know your students will point that out. Some information about just some key facts with the Canvas transition. The transition will happen in the fall of 2025. So that means if you're teaching this summer, you're going to still teach in Moodle. There's no teaching in Canvas this summer. The official start date is the fall. And then from there on out, we'll be teaching in Canvas. So that means that your course shells that you would normally get for your courses that come from the register with your registered students, those will be in Canvas because it'll be the fall. And then you're going to receive those the first week of April. So that'll give you some time to work on your courses in that time period. But know that content's not going to transition over automatically. So what you're going to do is you're going to get your course and it's just going to be blank. And so you need to bring that content over from Moodle in a manual process. And that's what we're going to show you today, how to do that. And it's not as big of a bear as you would think it would be. To use a terminology that you might be familiar with, it might just pinch a little bit, but it's not bad. So with the transition, it's up to the course instructor to prep their course. And then the ITRC, we're always here for guidance and support. So we have a number of ways that you can get in touch with us. We're here all year round. So we'll be here this summer. We have regular hours in the summertime. You can always contact us for help and we're available. We have temporary courses that are available now. And so that was part of the link package that was sent out in the email. A temporary course, and that's what it's called here, is a sandbox course. In Moodle, we called it a development course. And we kept that distinction, knowing that for a period of time, we're going to be going between two learning management systems. So in Canvas, it's sandboxes. You can request those now. You might already have one now if you've enrolled in the self-guided training. And that would come as a sandbox for you. It doesn't pertain to any specific course. And that's something that you can play around in. But you can request these sandbox courses for your specific classes. These are clean courses. They're not your semester course. And so you have some options. So you can either start now and import all your stuff into Canvas Sandbox and get it all set to go. And then later you'd have to do an import of that into your semester course, or you could wait until the first week of April when you have your semester course and then just work on it. So those are just some options that you have. There is a publishing deadline for your course of the 20th of August, and that's when Academic Affairs wants your courses to be available to students so that when they log on, they'll be able to see that in their course list. That doesn't mean that you have to have everything completely done and polished. So there's a different terminology with Canvas. In Moodle, you would get your semester course and it would show up for a period of time. It would be in the future. And then at some point we'd turn it over and it would go to in progress. And we always had people that were like, oh, where's my course? It's a little bit different in Canvas. You're going to get your course. It's going to be unpublished. So there's new terminology. There's, as opposed to hidden and available, it's now unpublished and published. And your course is going to be unpublished. You can publish your course at the course level. You can publish at the module level, and you can publish at the individual activity and resources. So what Academic Affairs is saying, we just want your course turned on. But that doesn't mean that all your weeks or whatever have to be completely done, because you can unpublish those things so that your students don't see it. And when we go into Canvas later, I'll show you exactly what we mean when we're talking about this. Ooh, real quickly, while we're talking about key facts, because it's not in here, we often have the question of what about Moodle? When is that going away? So your courses will be available to you in Moodle for a period of 2 years. Starting at the fall, you'll have 2 years to where you'll be able to access your Moodle course. And we do that because, first of all, a lot of departments and programs have accreditation where they need to pull data from courses. And so we don't want you to be without that. There's also the risk of students going back and disputing a grade. And so that grade information, you're going to need that as well. So what we recommend is, or we're going to have it open for 2 years, but we recommend that you just back up your course and you have it saved somewhere. We already talked about the Canvas transition website. I would say bookmark this because hopefully you're going to go back to this. We've had faculty who are like, I don't know where to go and I don't even know where to start. And this is it. We've compiled everything into one place. We're here for your guidance and support as the ITRC, but there's a lot of like how to self-help kind of stuff out on the Canvas transition website that can help you as well. And then, so there was some stuff in the email that was sent out ahead of time. And what that is that's just to give you that nudge to get you started, because there are some things that you want to do first before jumping in. Because we're going from Moodle into Canvas, so we're going from one learning management system into another, the first thing you want to do is you want to request a special course from Moodle. And that's a clean course that you want to back up and restore into this course. So that's like you're taking the last course, let's say a course that you taught in last fall for this fall coming up. So you want to move all your content over from your fall course into this special sandbox development course. That way you're only bringing over the content, you're not bringing over the data and other things like that. And so from there, so that's a request that you put in and we make that for you. We create that course for you and we let you know that it's out there in Moodle. And so then we'll get into talking about how to move that over to Canvas. But these were just some of the pre-work steps. So you want to request a Moodle content course for backup. You want to create a Canvas sandbox course so that it goes into, or like I said, if you want to wait until April when you get your fall semester courses, you can also do that. But we are going to demonstrate how to move all of your content from Moodle into Canvas. There's also a list here at the bottom, number 5, the packing list, and this talks you through step by step on how to pack up your course and import it into Canvas. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to talk a little bit about cleaning out the clutter. And what we do is we use a visual of you're moving out of your Moodle house, you're packing up all of your content in boxes, and you're putting it on a truck so that you can move it over to your shiny new Canvas house in a subdivision. So that's what Ryan's going to talk a little bit about next.
One of the things that you'll want to do, that we highly recommend that you do, is clear out whatever clutter you may have accumulated in your Moodle courses. Some of the folks who've been, I think at ISU, Moodle's been in use for about 15 years, maybe a little longer, which gives people a lot of time to accumulate some things that they might once have found useful and never felt a need to delete, but aren't really using anymore. And the file size limit for course imports into Canvas is only 500 megabytes, and that's not a number we can change. So in order to get things from Moodle over, you need to make sure that your course doesn't have more than that. Thankfully, student data doesn't count against that. And the biggest type of file is generally anything that's a video or anything that has audio. So if you have like a Zoom recording that you post, that you could expect to be pretty large. Also, if you have any PowerPoints that you have narrated or video in PowerPoints, those are going to be pretty large as well. But for those, you can take them out. Videos in particular, we recommend that you put into Panopto. And anything with that particular video hosting platform, which you access currently through Moodle, everything you organize in Panopto, you'll have to reconnect it over in Canvas, but everything will stay the same. All the files will still be there. That's what I'd recommend for videos. That's why after Google started to sort of turn the wrench on us as to how much storage we each got, we scrambled to make sure to be able to find a platform, and Panopto is by far the best one that we could find. So definitely recommend that that's where you put your videos. If you have them in YouTube already, that's great too. I wouldn't recommend that you shift, but if right now you only have them uploaded as files in Moodle, then Panopto is what I'd recommend. So also anything else that you're not using anymore. So any old forums or old quizzes or old assignments, we'd recommend that you can make a export or you can back those up So you can still, we'll be able to help you access them if you realize in 2 years, oh, I wish I had used that one. We can help you sort of resuscitate it. But in order to get it under that 500 megabytes limit, I'd recommend that you make it as slim and sleek as possible.
One thing about Panopto, so if you're already using it in your Moodle course, then you're going to need to reconnect it in Canvas. But if you have never used Panopto before, then you don't need to connect it in Moodle and then reconnect it in Canvas. You only need to connect it. You only need to upload your files into Panopto and then connect it into Canvas. There are instructors who are using it in their Moodle course, and when they do move it over into Canvas, they'll have to just reconnect it like they would like their utilities that they were moving into a house. But if you haven't used it yet, then worry about connecting that only in your Canvas course.
But you would have to connect it through either Moodle or Canvas. Don't go to just Panopto's own website. They will ask you for money. ISU is paying for your access. So in order to get that access through ISU, you have to go either through Moodle or through Canvas. Great. So first step is you sort of clean everything, declutter. Then once you've figured out which things are actually worth preserving and actually worth bringing with you into the new place, that's when you start actually thinking of packing up your course. So everything that you want to bring with you, we have a checklist. And I'd recommend, if you're like me and sometimes you don't start a project on Monday morning and then finish it Monday evening, sometimes you have to jump between a lot of different projects, you can make a different version of this checklist for each of the courses that you teach. So you know how far you got with each course. So on the slides that we sent, this link will work, but what it'll basically make is that'll take you to one of our Tiger Track articles. And the very first link there will open up a Google document, and then you can use that Google document for every one of your courses if you want. So that's the way I would do it, is when you open up a copy of that course, rename it of that checklist, immediately rename it whatever course you're thinking of, and then go ahead and just use multiple copies of that, one for each of the courses that you're bringing over. And as you're doing that, we have another list of the different equivalents between what Moodle calls a thing and what Canvas calls a thing. And if the conversion process will convert it automatically, or if you'd need to recreate it in Canvas with something slightly different. So we have a table of which things we recommend you approach in different ways. And if you have questions about that, again, call us and we'll be happy to walk you through what it means. So then, currently in Moodle, there are two different ways to bring things over from one semester or one course to another. Some people do things just entirely within Moodle. Some people just say, okay, bring this content over, reuse this individually. That's one way you can do it in Moodle. The other way you can do it in Moodle is you can have it generate a file, and then you load that file up again. If you use that, that's the basic process that you'll use to get from Moodle over to Canvas. So what you do is in the course reuse, it's under the More menu on the homepage of your Moodle course. You'll go and say that you want to go to course reuse, then you'll select backup, and then it'll generate a file for you. We recommend that you do this in two different steps, because if you do all of it, we've noticed that Canvas, for whatever reason, will duplicate all of your quizzes and all of your question banks. And so then you have to go through and delete them all, which I find really annoying. So it depends on you, how you're made, and also how many quizzes and question banks you have. If you only have one or two, it might not be worth doing two different exports. But if you have a bunch, like if you have one quiz each week or more than that, and you don't feel like deleting a lot of things, then we recommend doing two different backups. One that has all of the non-quiz question bank content, everything else, and then one that's just the quizzes and question bank for that course. So that'll minimize that weird duplication that Canvas is doing. And then once you've made those files, then you'd open up your sandbox course in Canvas and import them there. One of the reasons you need that special extra course is because Moodle has these really good guardrails so that One of the things that you need to do in order to export your quizzes is if you have anything random, you have 15 different questions and Moodle will only present 10 of them to the students to make sure that Sally isn't sitting in the same dorm room as Samantha and they're looking at each other's test and going through the test together. If you have that kind of setup, Moodle's exports don't bring over all 15 of those. So what you need to do is you need to, in Moodle, deselect anything in a quiz that would be sort of randomly polling your question bank. And you can't do that in a course where students have already taken the quiz. Because if you were able to do that, then that would change how students' grades work. And so Moodle just won't let you do that after the first student has taken the quiz. And so because it has that particular guardrail, that's one of the reasons we are suggesting that you make this temporary sandbox special course that no students will ever be enrolled in. To really extend the moving metaphor, that's like renting a storage space just so you can have a place to tinker with things. Then once you have it ready to go in Moodle, just the stuff that's going, you will also make a Moodle backup into a file. And then that file is what you'll bring into Canvas. Make a folder that's called Moodle Backups or whatever you want to call it. So then when you download it, you'll know where it is in a few weeks. The file is going to be M as in Moodle, B as in backup, and Z as in like a zip file. So that's how you'll know it's the right file format.
And you'll see when I demonstrate it, the whole process, depending on your course, first of all, your course size and complexity, and also depending on your internet Wi-Fi. But like when I do it, it takes less than 20 minutes to do from start to finish.
Yeah, and that's for an actual course in use. One that I made just for demonstration purposes was literally like a minute and a half. Yeah. So it can be very quick depending on how much you have in a course. But if you have a lot more questions, a lot more content, then a really minimal version that I made, 20 minutes is probably a good reasonable expectation.
And if I'm doing it all in the same thing, backing up from Moodle, downloading it, moving it over to Canvas in one swoop, it'll just go, like when I download, it goes to my computer's downloads, and that's where it stores it at. And like I said, I'll demonstrate that whole thing for you in just a few moments.
Yeah. The one funky thing about the files is that they're named, the automatic generated name has like the timestamp built in, if I remember correctly. And at least within Moodle, Moodle gets grumpy if you change that. So I'd recommend that you not change that. I don't remember for sure how Canvas does. So what I've been doing is when I download it, I put it in a folder that makes sense. So I add the name at the level of the folder. So like NURS 115, well, four digits, you know what I'm saying? And then just put that weird .mbz in there. And then just have one folder for each of the different courses. That's the way I've been approaching it. I haven't tested whether or not Canvas is clever enough to ignore the timestamp stuff. Okay, so we've talked about actually cleaning everything up in Moodle. We've talked about exporting a file. Now we're imagining we're in Canvas and we're going to start taking things out of the boxes. So out of that file. So when you do that, you'll just say that you're importing external content. And for every single course, Canvas will give you some alerts to say, these things, here are some surprises that happened. I don't know what to do with these particular things in this file that you just gave me. One thing you can anticipate, announcements. Moodle's announcements don't happen the same way as Canvas's. So you can anticipate that alert and just ignore it. You're going to have to put in your announcements differently. A thing you might choose to do is just put all of them into a Google document. So then you can just copy and paste them into Canvas. That's the simplest way I can think of to do it. But if you have a different approach, you're welcome to do whatever works for you. Then what you'll do is you will reconnect any external tools that you use. So if you use a publisher platform, if you have like, I don't know if we have access to virtual anatomy models or things, but if we had something like that, that would be something that would be external to Canvas that you need to reconnect. So anything of that sort, you'll need to reconnect in Canvas because you have to add permissions again. So whatever you've made in Moodle, it doesn't know to automatically give you permissions on the Canvas side. And then if for some reason you do have a tool that you need that you don't already see available to you, we have a form where you can request it, and then you'll get some information from the vendor, and then ISU will vet whether or not it's up to use standards. So then the last thing is just tidying everything up. So at that point, you might choose to look at things through the student view to see what it'll look like. Canvas has a really great student view. I think it's a lot more extensive than Moodle's. That's one of the things I like about Canvas the most, is the student emulation view. And so you can go through and see what your things look like to a student. You can check all the links again, make sure that all your quizzes came over correctly, because to me, the most frustrating thing about this process of moving from Moodle to Canvas is that when a quiz question doesn't have the corresponding type in Canvas, it will just silently discard it. So you might have 20 questions in a quiz that you know you made, but if a couple of them are ones that Canvas doesn't understand out of the box, like for instance, a multiple choice question where multiple things are correct. So like you should have the students select A and C. Canvas doesn't have that built in. And so instead of telling you, I don't know what to do with this, it just deletes it. So all of a sudden in Canvas, what you thought had 20 questions, in Canvas will only have 18. That's the thing that frustrates me about the move. We have an add-on that will give you those sort of questions back if that's something that you want to use. And it's already in there. It's called Atomic Assessments. It's already in Canvas because we knew that everybody would want to add that sort of thing. It's just not one that Canvas has. It's not like a plain vanilla part of Canvas. It's something that we had to go purchase for people on top of it. Finally, the last thing that I would say, just in terms of what has worked for me when I've been trying to do this, is if you have in your office or some other place a way to have have Moodle on one browser window and have another browser window right next to it in Canvas, I would recommend just going activity by activity, page by page in both, just so that's what has helped me find when Canvas does that weird silent deletion of things. It's tedious unless you're somebody who loves details. Some people do. But if you don't have quite that sort of exacting cross every T, dot every I kind of disposition, you might want to make some time in advance to do that. And that's one of the reasons I'm recommending that you make a checklist for each of the different courses so you'll know how far you've gotten in each one. So that's when you'd want to make sure that your gradebook matches what you want it to be doing, make sure that all of your videos are still accessible, all of that sort of detailed work. And again, Moodle currently is set up so that it will make your courses available to students on the first day of class. As Mark was saying earlier, in Canvas, the faculty member has to explicitly publish it instead of having it be done automatically. And the university wants that to be done by August 20th. So yeah, that's one of the big differences. And we're going to be sending many, many reminder emails to everybody who's still working here at that point. So if you're at ISU in August, you will be getting lots of emails reminding you of the published date. And I anticipate that we'll do that for every semester going forward. We haven't talked about spring, but I expect it'll be the same. Any questions about this so far? Okay, so if you want to learn more, we have lots of different instruction guides. We call them Tiger Track articles, in case you haven't seen them already. We also have a library of webinars. We do webinars every single Wednesday from 2 to about 2:20. It depends on how many questions there are is when the actual end time of those are, as you all know, because I've seen your faces in them before. And we also have a schedule of those. So if you want to know what else we'll be doing for the rest of the semester, that third link on this slide will take you to the schedule of those. And whenever you want to reach out to us, the email that goes to all of us. So if somebody's out or if somebody's in a meeting that's lasting all day, the fastest way to get a response will be if you send an email to itrc@isu.edu. You can also give us a phone call, 208-282-5880. For those folks who are in Pocatello, you can, for the rest of the semester, you can go to Oboler Library, and we're in the basement in B17, but we're going to be moving later this semester.
If you're on Pocatello, we're going to be up in the College of Ed building.
We are excited. Well, the people in Pocatello are excited about that because they'll actually have windows instead of being in the basement. And also, we have on-demand appointments that you can make with us. So these can be over Zoom, they can be over the phone, or they can be in person, whichever platform you prefer. And for the future Wednesday webinars, we announce those every week in Idaho State Today. So make sure to keep reading that. And also, if you haven't already bookmarked the ISU Canvas transition website, I highly recommend that you do, because that's where we'll keep putting any announcements out right there. And I think Mark was going to demonstrate the backup process now, so you can actually see the interface instead of just hearing us describe it for you.
Yeah, we'll walk through it. Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to bring over, please pay no attention to the titles of my course because we're going to put UDL content into a Japanese course. Pay no attention to that. So here's my Moodle course. And going back to what Ryan was saying about tidying up your course, if you look down here, you'll see how they look differently too. But all these, like any images, so we had talked about how the biggest culprit of space on your course is videos. Another one is images. So any images that you have, you might consider taking those off and then redecorating it later on. And because what's going to happen is, so this image here is on the main page of my course. And when I move all this content over to Canvas, Canvas then is, remember when I was saying that it's like a table of contents. And so what it's going to do, it's going to plunk this image, which was on the main page of my course, into a page. And I may or may not want that. So that's one thing to consider to help slim down your courses, just to get rid of those images. Get rid of any announcements or anything like that was like back in last spring where it was like, hey, students, we're not meeting on Friday. Get rid of all that if that's on the main page of your course, because that's just going to clutter things up once you've moved your content over and you're sifting through and seeing what you want to keep or not. It's just going to make your job a lot easier if you remove all that unnecessary stuff before you take it into Canvas. That's my recommendation. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the backup and download portion of it. So we mentioned before that's under this More section, and you're familiar with this process if you've imported from Moodle to Moodle. And then we're going to go down to Course Reuse at the bottom and select that. And it's going to take us to that page. And so if you notice over here on the left-hand side, it defaults to import because that's the most common thing that you would normally use it for. But in this case, we want to click on this drop-down box and go down to the second one, which is called Backup. And now it's going to take me into the screen where it says, okay, now that you've told me you want to back up, what do you want to back up? And so you can back up in Moodle, you can back up the whole course, you can back up a module or week, you can back up individual activities, you can back up, as Ryan talked about earlier, just your question bank. So there's a lot of different options. But if I'm just backing up my content, it's going to just default. And so what is here is kind of like what you would normally take over, unless, as Ryan had said earlier, if you want to, in that second step, move over your content bank, in which case then you would just uncheck this and it would only move over the content, not the question bank. And then you would, in that second step, you would just uncheck all this other stuff and just include your content. And you may have done that before if you were just moving things over individually. And I hope that came across clear. But for our demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave everything because I don't have a question bank in this course. It's pretty basic course. So all I need to do now is jump to the final step. And it's going to take just a few moments. And this may depend, depending on your speed of your Wi-Fi or whatever. But I usually I remind myself with the hands off at this point, because you don't want to impede this process. It's going to take a few moments to do, but here we go. Everything's backed up, completed, turned from red to green, 100%. I click on continue. And so this is within Moodle, this is like the private storage space for all of your courses. And if you look down here, you could see like 2018, I backed up something, but your most recent one is at the very top here. And it's the very first one, March the 18th at 4:34 p.m. This is the one that I just backed up. And so now what that means is I backed up the course. Now I'm ready to download it. And that's the second step. And so I'm just going to go over here. But before I do, I want to talk about something real quickly, and that's file size of your course. And we talked about that earlier. You want to stay under that 500 megabytes of space in your course, because if not, then things are going to get a little wonky when you try to move it over, or it might not go at all. So you'll see that this course that I'm moving over is only 6.2 megabytes because it's really simple. But you can see like down here, some of the other ones, 225 megabytes, 630, and it's real easy to get up to that 500, I will say, especially if you have in that Moodle course, you've uploaded videos, because that's weighing you down, lots of images, that's weighing you down. And so you might be like, oh, 500, that's a lot, but it really adds up quickly.
While you're on this screen, the file that you can see over on the left, you can see that each of those file names ends with MBZ. It's possible from a different screen on Moodle to create a zip file that it would just say .zip. Canvas won't understand that. It doesn't know how to import that. So if you realize that Canvas is not letting you do what you think you should be able to do, make sure that you actually have that .mbz file, not a .zip file.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so now I'm going to download my file. This is the most recent one that's on top. And you'll see that it will move up to the little space in the corner. And that's moving it into my downloads folder. And that's where I'll be able to find my course. But actually, what I can do is just utilize that to move things over. So now what I did, and just to recap, I went into my Moodle course. I backed up my course, which saved it on the Moodle storage area. And then from there, I downloaded that MBZ file, which Canvas will recognize. I downloaded that into my downloads folder. So now I'm going to go over to my Canvas course, which you can see is a blank course right now. And then I'm going to go over here to import existing content. And this all came up last night, so this is kind of weird. But so the first thing I want to do is I want to select the content type. And Moodle 1.9 2 point something is the only Moodle that comes up. So I want to select Moodle. You don't have to worry about anything else, because that's where we're pulling this. And that tells Canvas, hey, be on the lookout for this particular file. Here we go. And this is where I want to go and get that file and plop it into here. You could drag it. I could go up here to my downloads and drag it in. You can choose the file, and then it'll bring up the box to where I can choose it from the downloads file, which I like to do that. And so select my Moodle file, and then I'm going to click open, and you'll see that it brought it in. You could tell at the bottom here, this is the file that I'm bringing in. There's a default question bank option here, so I could choose if I want to bring in specific question banks or not. And then you can also say, I want to bring in all content or specific, because Canvas has that same feature. It can import the whole course. It can import a week or a module, or it can import a specific activity. And in this case, I want to do all the content in the course. Adjusting due dates. So depending on which one you're working on, if you're working in a Canvas sandbox, here you want to adjust the dates to the first day of the fall semester. But if we're working in your fall semester shell course, that's already been done for you, and you don't need to worry about that. So it really just depends on which one you are working in. So I'm just going to leave that unchecked. I'm not going to bother with that. And so now I want to click this button here that says +, add to import queue. And this is what's going to then import my file. And another hands-off moment, it's uploading the file. And you can see down here where it says Moodle importer that it's queued. And so I'm just going to let this chill for a little bit because you can see it's doing its progress. And it may, like I said, it may take a little while depending on your speed. So now it comes up and it says it's partially completed, which you're most likely going to get. And I'll explain a number of reasons why you're going to get it. Not a big deal. You can actually go in and view these issues. There's a known issue with announcements. And so your announcements from Moodle are not going to import over into Canvas. So you're always going to get this weird message, and pay no attention to it. If you use your announcements over and over in your Moodle course, a lot of instructors do that for efficiency and for time savings. As each semester they'll save their announcements and then they'll just modify it and put it into the new course. And I would recommend doing that offline in a Google Doc because that's just good, efficient teaching. Back to what I was talking about. That's the only issue that happened with my import. I don't have to worry about it. But before, when we talked about Panopto, and if you had your videos in your Moodle course that were in Panopto, it's going to tell you that you need to reconnect those. So that might be some of the other issues that come up with the importer. But in most cases, just go through it, read it. You might see something funky. You might not. If you do see something funky, give us a call. If you see something that's standard, like the ones that I told you, the announcements, don't worry about that. The Panopto video relinking thing, don't worry about that because that's just a reminder. So now all my content should be in Canvas. So all I have to do is I click home and it might take a little while. Here we go. And so all of my content is now moved over into Canvas. And because I'm using a course that I've always used, or that I often use in these demonstrations, because we do a lot of departments, you'll see that everything is in a published state, but that won't be true when you bring it over into your course for the first time. Everything's going to be unpublished. And what you need to do is then go and publish things. So that's one thing
It's
where
that
this
green checked icon is one of the ways you can tell
Yeah.
at a glance.
Yeah. So that's one thing why this isn't exactly the most
That's the
accurate.
equivalent of the hide, unhide in
Yeah.
Moodle.
Exactly. A good comparison, Danielle. Because so here's what it would look like. It would come over and it would be all these little Ghostbuster signs here. And so then you want to change it to publish when you're ready. So remember when we said about the August 20th published, that means that Academic Affairs, when students go in a couple days before the classes start, they want them to be able to see all their courses in there so they're not freaking out. To do that, it's over here in the course status. If you change this, click on that download and click on publish, you could see, okay, so now my course is ready for students to view, but since I have all of this stuff unpublished, they wouldn't be able to see it. So depending on where you are at that moment during that first week, you might have this whole thing done and you're like, I'm good, I'm ready to go. Or you might be like, you know what? I still have to work on weeks 11 through 16 or whatever. So you could just keep that hidden and then just show what is ready for students to see. And sometimes it might just be, hey, I just want them to be able to see their course and to go in there and to get the syllabus. And oftentimes that's really all they want until classes start. Yeah, so there it is. So yeah, you have a couple options. So course status, that's where you can publish and unpublish the whole thing. You have up here too, where it has a couple options. So I can publish all the modules and all the items. And I use that to actually unpublish everything. Or you can publish the modules only, which I think would just give you the title of it. Or you can unpublish all the modules and all the items. Or you can unpublish only the, so there's options. But yeah, that's what we mean by when we say publish and unpublish. So now my content is all in here. I'm going to pause if you have any other questions at this point, because we kind of went through a lot. But as you can see, that didn't really take a whole lot of time to do. And that's just one course. You might have like 8 courses to do that with. If you've been teaching this for like the past, 8 years, and you've and you've accumulated 500 some questions and it's really complex, that's what I would say, do that separate backup and import. But if you, let's say you just prepped this course like last year and you might only have like 50 questions, you could try just doing a full-blown like one-shot import of everything. We've only really run into problems where we've had courses where there are like hundreds of questions that have just been built up over like 10 years. And you know what? Actually, like each time that you move a Moodle course to another Moodle course to another Moodle course, that question bank, it's going to pull over all those copies too. That's why we say go through your question bank and just do like a clean house in that. So that's kind of like your garage, like your course is your house, your question bank is your garage. Go through your garage and just delete all those questions. You might see duplicates, delete those. You might see ones you're like, I haven't used these questions in like 5 years. Get rid of them because it's just going to make your life easier when you pull that over into Canvas. And that whole like copy of a question is just kind of a weird thing when you're pulling things from one LMS to another, and it just goes back and gives you that whole history. So that's why we say, depending on like how complex your bank is, you might need to do it separately, or you could do it in one swoop, and it just depends on how many questions you currently have in there.
And the other thing is, if your questions mostly come from a publisher, then you can just mostly ignore that too and just get a copy of it straight from the publisher. That's probably the simplest thing if that's the case for your course. If you're having to refine your course or if you have other questions that you've made, then what Mark's talking about is what we'd recommend. But if it's something where it's the publisher has made most of the quizzes, in that case, I would say don't bring over the questions at all from Moodle and just get them straight from the publisher. And then if there are new ones that you want to add, just make them in Canvas.
If you have assignments where students have to upload their papers, their term papers or whatever, that's all going to come over. Discussion forums, there's an equivalent, but there are some other kind of less common activities in Moodle that don't necessarily have an equivalent in Canvas. And we do have a guide that kind of walks you through that. But yes, back to your question, the quizzes that you have in Moodle will move over in the import into Canvas. And it does it. So you don't have to redo that.
With the quizzes, though, that's where sometimes those silent surprises happen, where if in Moodle you have 50 questions, but a couple of them are the specific question types that Canvas doesn't understand. When you go in Canvas and open that quiz up, if you had 50 in Moodle, but 10 were those ones that Canvas doesn't understand, when you open it up in Canvas, you might find it only knows what to do with 40 of those. And so 10 of them are just gone. And that's why I'd say it's good to open them both up in two different browser windows so you can compare.
And if they're lost, I could always add them in Canvas, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good, awesome suggestion, Ryan.
Those are great questions. So thank you, Denise.
Oh, thanks for your answers. Appreciate it.
Another importing alert that Mark was talking about with the announcements, another common one that we've seen is that if you use Moodle's auto linking, where it will like look for certain words and it will link to another module or another assignment in Moodle, if you use that a lot, Canvas doesn't know what to do with those links. So it'll tell you that links are broken. And so that's one of the other really common ones, but you can just fix that in Canvas. You can just tell it link to this instead. And when you fix that just once in Canvas, Canvas knows how to back up and restore within Canvas and make sense of it. So you only have to fix that the very first time you move from Moodle to Canvas.
Other than that, I would just say, like, play around in Canvas, get used to the layout of things. Go over here to this side menu and just see what these are all about. So you'll see that, like, I've been going home, and so the home page in the standard Canvas, all Canvas template that we have points you to this page here, which just shows all the modules or weeks. You can change that. So there's some customization with Canvas. So you can say, well, I don't want it to show that. I want it to show like, all my instructor information, maybe a nice photo that I have. So you can change that. Here's the grade book, and so it's under grades, and it's really kind of, I don't have any students here, so it doesn't really do a nice job of showing it, but it's just going to give you anything that you've assigned an assignment to, the student's name and the total. You can do categories and weights, but it's in a weird, funky spot, and I'll show you. So instead of under the grade book, which I think was where it should be, it's actually under assignments, this assignments category. It's under groups. So if I click on this, and then I can name my groups, and so I can make this my quizzes. And then I could do that again and say these are assignments. And maybe this other one is forums. All right. And so then, yeah, under each one of these, now I can go under the kebabs and do my assignment weights. And so this is where I can then go and say, okay, so now I have 4 things. I have assignments in there twice. I must have, but anyway, so I could do like 25.
One thing that's interesting about Canvas is it will follow your instructions very explicitly. So if you tell it that each of these, there's 4 of them, if you tell it each of them is only worth 20%, students will only be able to get at maximum 80% in your course. Everyone will be upset. So you need to make sure that the total adds up to 100. Right now, Moodle is a little more clever, and it will assume that you want things to round out to 100, and it'll do the math behind the scenes. So if you've been relying on that for a long time, remember that Canvas is a lot more explicit. It doesn't think you want it to add up to 100. It will just follow your orders verbatim. So that's one of the weird things about weights in Canvas.
I moved my wireless keyboard, and so I messed something up, and so now I'm not able to input it into my keyboard. But that's where you would then go and say, this is 25%, this is 10%, this is, and that's where you would be able to put those weights. And then it would show up. Once I do that, if I go back to the grades, then it shows up and it's in the categories here. And that's how I could set up my grade book. So I apologize for my technical malfunction there.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. This was really helpful. And
Yeah,
then
thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
all
for
so much
joining
for your
us.
time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate
Yeah, thank you
it.
guys. Appreciate you.
we're here to support you. So don't worry about that. We want to make this as painless as possible.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. We appreciate it.
Thank
all
you.
right. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.